Tiger fans, welcome to another episode of Tiger Talk with the 1400 Club. I am the Corey C. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We do not want you to miss a single episode. We have some surprising shows, some surprising guests coming up all season long. So you want to make sure you're tuned in. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, whether that's the Apple Podcast app, the Google Podcast app, Spotify, YouTube, you name it. So follow the show and tell every Tiger that you know. And remember, when you support Tiger Talk with 1400 Club, it all helps the cause, which is the I Love Jackson State University. And of course, football is back, and Bet Online is your number one information source for all your sporting wagers, info, with all the up-to-the-minute stats, news, scores, and matchup breakdowns. Get the latest game odds, spreads, and totals from the NFL and college football right at your fingertips with Bet Online's real-time updates, stats, news, and odds. From week 1 all the way to the college football playoff and Super Bowl, Bet Online gives you access to the best football promotions and contests available anywhere online. So head on over to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Remember to use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. All right, and we have a big one coming up. The Jackson State Tigers will be traveling over to Texas to take on an FBS opponent, big-time FBS opponent. First time playing this team, and we are looking forward to it. Not a lot of familiarity with this team, so we had to go and find the guys who know all about this Texas State Bobcats team. And I have two good ones here for you. First and foremost, he has been around the program and the university for 20 years, give or so. I don't want to give away his age. We'd say about 20 years, from a student to radio and TV broadcasts, and now the ESPN Plus play-by-play announcer for Texas State Athletics. None other than Mr. Brant Freeman. Welcome to Tiger Talk with 1400 Club.
Happy to be here, Corey. Looking forward to it, man. Everything's going great. Looking forward to it.
Perfect. All right. We are also joined by a man who has almost 25 years of experience announcing high school football, basketball, and baseball games throughout the state of Texas. And he is currently the play-by-play voice for Texas State football and men's basketball, none other than Clint Shields. Welcome to Tiger Talk with the 1400 Club.
Corey, thank you. Good to see you. Good to see you, Brant. Glad to be here with y'all.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Looking forward to meeting you guys. Looking forward to the game coming up. Of course, a first-time matchup between these two schools, and we don't know what to expect. We've been hearing about this Texas State program for a while now. You guys just kind of, I don't want to say came out of nowhere, but in the past year or so, your name has really started to make some national headlines and national waves with what's going on with the program. So we want to talk about it. Of course, last season, 4-8 overall. I think you guys were 2-6 in the Sun Belt Conference, but this is a totally different team with much higher expectations. And I think it all starts with your new head coach, G.J. Kinney, the offensive mastermind who orchestrated the number one offense in the country last season at Incarnate Word. Brant, so talk to us about your new coach.
Yeah, so Corey, as you mentioned, G.J. Kinney came over from Incarnate Word, where last year they were explosive offensively. At the FCS level, led the country in scoring more than 50 points a game. And he was there for 1 year. Before he took over, Eric Morris was the head coach, and then Morris left to become the offensive coordinator at Washington State. Now he's the head coach in North Texas. So G.J. Kinney comes in, background that included time at Central Florida and Arkansas, a great playing background, a star quarterback at the University of Tulsa, later some time in the NFL, with the Eagles, and really, took the FCS world by storm last year with the kind of run UIW had. They were a play or two away from playing for the national championship last year. Just fell short against North Dakota State. But he comes to Texas State, brings with him a number of coaches from that staff to include both of his coordinators offensively and defensively. A number of players came with them as well. 9 Incarnate Word transfers are now part of the Texas State program. Young head coach, 34 years old. Thought to be one of the young up-and-comers, in the industry right now. The brand of football he wants to play, is entertaining. Not only offensively, all his points being scored, but defensively, his teams play very aggressive. They get in the backfield a lot, sacks, tackles for loss, forcing turnovers. So, we're only 2 games into his tenure, and they played 2 very entertaining games so far.
Absolutely.
A monumental milestone season opening win at Baylor, first ever win over the Power 5, and did so convincingly in Waco too. And then last week, facing one of the top Group of 5 programs in the country in UTSA in front of 50,000, and held their own. Ultimately came up a touchdown short of that game, but 2 games in, it's been very encouraging, the GJ Kinney era.
And Clint, I know I mentioned earlier, you've covered high school football throughout the state of Texas, and we know that it's one of the most tradition-rich states when it comes to football talent. I know Coach Kinney implemented this mantra called "Take Texas Back," and so talk about. I know he's only been there a short amount of time, and I think only 9 months so far. But talk about what he's been able to do in such a short amount of time from a recruiting standpoint.
Yeah, the Take Back Texas kind of initiative, if you will, is something that we asked him on the show a couple of weeks ago who really gets credit for that, and he says he'll take it. So he takes credit for that hashtag and kind of getting that started. And really, I think it's a matter of trying to get back to the roots of Texas high school football in your recruiting, making that the base of what you're doing in this modern era of college football with the transfer portal. I don't think as a coach anymore, you have the luxury of just recruiting and building from the bottom up like that. You have to take that into account every year. I think with guys who move on, either through, the transfer portal themselves, they graduate, they get drafted, injuries force them into, retirement or what have you. You've got to look at that. But he's really tried to I think focus a lot of the transfer portal activity, and certainly I think second in the country behind Deion Sanders and that Colorado program in terms of the number of transfers that they brought in. A heavy dose of that are guys who are Texas high school kids who went elsewhere to play and now transferring, have come back to the Lone Star State, and then back that up with getting back to the roots of Texas high school football in recruiting. And he's got, I think, 200 recruits coming in for this this game this weekend with Jackson State, a couple on official visits. And the vast majority, if not all of these, are Texas high school kids. And I think that was kind of in the early days of the transfer portal, kind of got pushed aside, the high school ranks. It was sort of a win now approach, which I understand the need to do that, to upgrade the roster and try to have some immediate success. And if you hit on all the right guys, you can certainly do that. But if you don't, well, I think Texas State's kind of been mired in 3 and 4 win territory for a while. They've gotten a really big boost in the talent level through the transfer portal off of this last class. But at the same time, there's a large class of high school signees underneath it. And then I think the focus going forward appears to be at the high school ranks. Like I said, it may be supplemented a little bit to take care of some immediate need with, some experience or, a guy comes out of a Power 5 school looking to transfer and, he's got certain abilities and intangibles that you want to take a shot at versus wait 2 years to develop off of a kid coming out of high school. But that Take Back Texas initiative, really, it gets down to high school recruiting and building the talent underneath. So as the current upperclassmen move on, you've got Texas high school kids underneath that have been in your program, hopefully for 2 and 3 years, and continue to grow.
Absolutely. A good mix of players coming in through the transfer portal and from the high school ranks. I think a total of 71 new players on the team, and 24/7 Sports ranked the recruiting class as the second best in the Sun Belt and the best in Texas State history. So kudos to Coach for that. But that's a pretty big roster overhaul. And that's something that we know all about here at Jackson State. We've seen it twice in the past 3 years when Coach Prime initially came. I mean, he almost started over from scratch as far as bringing in new players. But, of course, he just left, and Coach T.C. Taylor took over. And I'm sure you heard about it, but we relied heavily on the transfer portal as well, not to mention the high school signing class. And we brought in some really talented guys, and we had the number 2 recruiting class in FCS. Now, the challenge with that can be getting all those guys to gel in such a short amount of time. But both programs, Jackson State and Texas State, started off the season with big-time wins, but both took a step back in their second game. So, Brant, how would you say this Bobcats team has gelled early on in the season with all the new players?
Yeah, I would say, they've gelled pretty well so far, Corey. Really that very first game, it looked like these guys have been playing with each other for years. It was incredible with the chemistry they had, specifically on the offensive side of the football. I mean, the first drive of the game, they go 3 and out, and then they don't punt again until the fourth quarter. they had at one point 4 consecutive touchdown drives. And that's with mixing in different personnel. It wasn't the same running back, same receiver making these plays. It was multiple guys getting involved. I thought the offensive line played as well as I've ever seen the offensive line play in that game against Baylor, a really well-coached defensive team, by Dave Aranda at Baylor, who has a tremendous defensive background, and they hung 42 on them, in Waco. Now, last week it wasn't, maybe it wasn't as impressive. You can kind of see some growing pains there a little bit, with all these new players. And it's funny, you mentioned Coach Prime. At the FBS level, Colorado led the country in new players added. Roster turnover, they had the highest.
Mm-hmm.
The second highest, Texas State. So in Colorado, Texas State, in terms of new players on the team, and yet both won on the road against the Big 12 as big underdogs, week one. But but getting back to that second game, they did have a pretty tough injury on the offensive line. One of those 9 newcomers from Incarnate Word, as I mentioned, that came with Coach Kenny from San Antonio, and Nash Jones, and his loss up front really impacted, I thought, the remainder of the game when it came to pass protection, run lanes and that kind of thing. Maybe the environment of the Alamo Dome made communication a little bit tougher when it came to quarterback getting calls out to his receivers and offensive line protection calls and all that. So the chemistry looked great in week one, not as good as week two, but we know this, Corey, the result will always dictate the narrative, right? You win a game, and then it's because your chemistry was great. Your new players are great. Your coaching was great. Everything was great. And you lose, and you start to question all those things. So,
same thing.
That just comes with wins and losses. But all in all, I think this new group has gelled together immensely well. And I really do think this past Saturday, I hate to admit this, said more about UTSA than it did Texas.
Wow. Clint, when you look at that big upset win over Baylor in week one, and you compare it to the letdown in week two versus the UTSA team that one might think was probably a more favorable matchup for you, what are some things that you think contributed to that step back, and how would you say the team's mentality is coming off that loss?
Well, from what I've heard and from being around them, seeing them in practice and now through the first couple of weeks of the season, as to their mindset, I think they were angry coming off the field and hurt to have not won. I think they went into both ball games, to be honest with you, including the game in Waco against Baylor, expecting to step on the field and compete and win. They weren't there for moral victories. They weren't there to hang around and make it a fourth quarter game and be close. They were there to win and believed that they could in both cases. To Brant's point, if you're asking me to look at UTSA and Baylor on the field, having seen them both, I think UTSA is a better football team than Baylor. Defensively, really got after it up front. They were physical and aggressive and caused, Texas State problems really from the get-go. And then after the loss of Nash Jones to a lower leg injury, I think it just kind of exacerbated it a little bit. And, the letdown, the side of it, I think as the game went on, it was a really tough physical game. UTSA was able to control the clock, and they did it, kind of in short bursts. Took advantage of some third down conversions and a couple of fourth down conversions, but ran 92 offensive plays, yet had 370, I think, total yards or around there. So it was about 4 yards of play. Defensively, Texas State certainly held its own, kept its offense having a chance to win the ball game. They just couldn't get on track. So I do think that they were upset with themselves when they came off the field, missed some opportunities, complete a 50-plus yard, pass to a Cole Wilson receiver down the middle who catches it in stride at the 15. And unfortunately, that momentum tripped him up and he fell down at the 7, or he scores. Extra point makes it a 17-17 game in the fourth. And who knows where we go from there. As it was, they had to settle for a field goal and make it 17-13 in ultimately a 20-13 game. So it was a game that was there for the taking, even though I think Texas State certainly struggled by comparison to their performance in week one.
And Brant, as we look forward, Your starting quarterback, TJ Finley, big guy, 6'7", 250. A lot of our fans are going to be familiar with him. He has some SEC experience, having played at both LSU and Auburn. But talk about his play so far and how settled would you guys say that position is? It looks like he's taken all the snaps, or at least the majority of the snaps, but I know there's some talent behind him, most notably Malik Hornsby, another SEC transfer from Auburn.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Corey, you're looking at TJ Finley, and you mentioned his stature. 6'7", 250. He's an NFL-sized defensive end with an arm, and he can be tough to take down too. We referenced the win at Baylor, and there are a couple of times he had a Houdini act back there where he's bouncing off of would-be tacklers and keeping a play alive, extending it, leading to a touchdown on a pass to Denario Davenport. So he's hard to bring down. He has tremendous arm strength. You referenced his time in the SEC at both Auburn and LSU. 11 starts between those two programs. 4-star recruit out of high school. And I thought the quarterback battle coming into camp was between he and Malik Hornsby. They were 1 and 2 in that race, and he just had a better camp. Hornsby had. Now he has a different skill strength than Malik Hornsby does. Not that TJ Finley is immobile, because certainly he's proven that he's not. He can move. He's not as fast as Hornsby, but that's not a fair comparison because Hornsby is one of the fastest quarterbacks in the country. Hornsby in Arkansas didn't get a ton of opportunities. He got some. And his skill set is certainly, making plays outside the pocket, beating you with his feet kind of thing. Not that he's, incapable of throwing the ball, threading the needle, or throwing the ball 50 yards down the field. It's just that Hornsby does those things a little bit better. Coach Kenny did mention to us in the radio show, to Clint and I, on Monday, that they had some packages ready to go, with Hornsby at UTSA this past week, but the timing of it wasn't right. But that tells me, though, is that they are, they want to get him on the field. He's too talented not to get him out there. And I would not be surprised at all to see him, in a few packages this upcoming Saturday against Jackson State. Both quarterbacks are new to the program. There isn't a single quarterback on the roster that took a snap with his team a year ago. Wow. And so the fact that there was a debate between those two was actually a good problem. That meant that you have depth at the position, and if knock on wood, anything were to happen to Hornsby, the assumed starter, you have an SEC 4-star guy who can run a 4.3 40 right there in the wings when the wing's ready to go. So that's kind of the take in the quarterback situation as of right now.
Mm-hmm. Similar at Jackson State with our quarterback situation, we have our starter, but we have a backup who could bring a different dimension to the table. So we try to implement a package or two for him each game, bring him in, and kind of switch things up. But one thing I can say about TJ Finley is no interceptions this season, which is huge to take care of the ball. And Texas State is one of only 29 FBS programs that can say that. So great job with that. But Clint, talk about those guys up front. You kind of mentioned it earlier, I think an injury or so, but they say everything's bigger in Texas. And that's definitely true when it comes to that offensive line. I mean, just looking at it, you guys go 6'5", 320, 6'6", 320. 6'6", 325, 6'7", 350, 6'4", 330. I mean, that is massive. And there's chemistry there, too, because at least 3 of those guys played together at UIW. So talk about the beef up front.
Yeah, 4 actually. 4 of the 5 starters in the first 2 games are transfers from Incarnate Word. I think there were 9 new offensive linemen that came in, and a line averaging 6'5", 315, I think, across that front. And Bray Walker, a transfer from Oklahoma, is really, I mean, he's bigger than most humans should be allowed to be. I mean, he's a massive individual and can move as well. I mean, they will pull him across. And so when you get somebody that big who can move forward, if you're standing there trying to set the edge defensively, the last thing you want to see coming at you is Bray Walker. UTSA, a couple occasions, found that out on Saturday afternoon. But no, it's a group that, obviously plays well together, having 4 guys who did it and did it at a high level at Incarnate Word last year, going to the FCS semifinals, coming in, bringing also, or maybe he brought them, but, maybe they brought him, I'm not sure, but their offensive line coach from Incarnate Word also is on this staff with G.J. Kinney having come with him. So not only does he know 4 of his 5 starters through the first 2 games, they know him and his coaching style and what's expected and can relay that to the other new faces that have come in. And I think like any football team, the line play, both sides of the ball, is really where it starts. And so that offensive line against Baylor at times was able to reestablish the line of scrimmage on run plays 3 and 4 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. That's what was so impressive about that night to me up in Waco, was to go into a Big 12 building and do that to a Big 12 defense. UTSA last weekend, really I felt like was the aggressor on that side, on the defensive line side of the ball, and didn't give Texas State's offensive line really. They never got comfortable in terms of firing off and pushing guys around. It was stalemated at best for most of the night, and just didn't really allow any running lanes. Forced Texas State to kind of be in some throwing situations that were predictable, and then they got after the offensive line a little bit. Pressured TJ Finley, forced some early throws, got a couple of sacks. He's done a really good job of taking care of the ball rather than throwing it into dangerous spots. But at the same time, it's going to have to be a better performance by the offensive line coming up this week. I certainly think they're capable of it because we've seen it in the Baylor game, and first time to do it in front of the home crowd. We'll see how they respond to that on Saturday night.
Yeah, very noticeable when you look at the running game versus Baylor compared to versus in week 2 versus UTSA. Definitely a night and day difference. Had some success running against Baylor, but tough going against UTSA. And a lot of it had to do with, of course, some sacks and things like that affected the yards negatively. But overall, averaging 87 yards per game. So, Brant, how important is it going to be for you to get that running game going to help your quarterback out?
I think it's going to be really key, not only this Saturday, but moving forward. I look at third down, and Texas State really struggled on third down, in the Alamo Dome on Saturday. And the way that you win third down is by winning first and second. You got to make third down more manageable. You have to make sure the defense is kind of guessing what you're going to do. On 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, not much of a secret. You're almost certainly going to be throwing the ball. And that's because you didn't win enough yards on first and second down where you're in a passing situation and a passing down. If you get, 3-4 yards on both first and second by running the ball, then all of a sudden you're looking at 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, and you could open up your playbook a little bit more. You can maybe run again, run some play action, disguise some things, fool the opposing defense or whatever the case may be. So that's why running the ball effectively is going to be very important for this game on Saturday. And again, moving forward for this team. And, as exciting as they can be in terms of stretching the field and getting vertical and that kind of thing, they want to be balanced offensively. I looked at Incarnate Word's numbers from a year ago, and 50 points a game. And, Lindsey Scott, their quarterback, was the Walter Payton Award winner. And he was tremendous, as were the Cardinal receivers. But I looked, and they ran the ball just as well as they threw it. This is a part of the Mac Leftwich G.J. Kenny offense, is running the football. And when I talked to Coach Kenny early in the week about the running back position, they don't have a bell cow. I look at Jackson State. Irv Mulligan has been the bell cow back for the Tigers. For the Bobcats, they really don't have that. So it feels like it's a matter of riding the hot hand. But they need, of the 3 or 4 backs they have, somebody's got to get hot to ride them. And I think we kind of saw that a little bit in Waco with Ishmael Mahdi. Himself, by the way, a former FCS guy at Houston Christian. We really never saw the hot hand in San Antonio. And now it wasn't just the backs, as Clint talked about too. It was offensive line play and losing Nash Jones early in the game. But if they can get, the run game going, then this team becomes very, very hard to beat.
Yeah, you talk about those struggles on third down, only a 29% third down conversion percentage. So I know that's something that Coach Kenny is focused on cleaning up. But Clint, our head coach, T.C. Taylor, he talks a lot about your speed at the wide receiver position. So who are some guys that stand out in that wide receiver room?
Well, there's two guys that really who return off of last year's squad. Ashton Hawkins, who was the leading receiver a year ago, a real difference maker with the football in his hands, broke his collarbone, I think, with 3 games left a season ago. And so he was lost for the rest of the year. So having him back, and that's one of the big recruiting wins for G.J. Kinney and staff. He had actually entered the transfer portal at the end of last season. One of the first tasks that they had when they got here was to get him out of the portal and convince him to stay here in San Marcos, which they did. Him and Julian Ortega-Jones are really the only 2 names left that saw, significant playing time off of that squad from a year ago. You add Cole Wilson, who I mentioned earlier, dangerous not only at the out wide, but in the kick return game as well. And so when you have him and Hawkins on the field together, they're almost 2 prototypes of each other. One wears 1, one wears 2, and they look and move almost the same when they're on the field as far as their size and stature and their speed and ability to cut and change direction goes. Out wide, you've got transfers from Marshall. You got another one in Sean Shaw, who goes about 6'6", transfer from Iowa State. We really saw him for the first time last week down in San Antonio. Joey Hobart, who was a All-American at Utah Tech, I believe it was, came in and had a touchdown catch and 3 or 4 big grabs, including an ESPN top 10 highlight. May have been the number 1 that night, that one-handed grab along the sideline. And then last week, you have Drew Donnelly. Date myself a little bit, son of Doug Donnelly, former Dallas Cowboy from back in the 1980s. Really, I think we saw him for the first time a week ago, caught 5 balls in the Alamo Dome against UTSA. He may be the fastest of the wide receiver core. And so they've added a level of explosiveness, and to go with the throwing ability of TJ Finley, the ability to go downfield and be vertical, I think is something that this group was missing last year and maybe the last 2 and 3 seasons that's been added back into the mix this year. Not that you want to come out and throw it 40 yards down the field every snap, but defensively, if you have to think about it every snap, it kind of helps. You can kind of dictate the way the defense has to play you to a certain degree.
Absolutely. And if we look at the defensive side of the ball, Brant, the Bobcats are giving up 27.5 points per game. And I talked about how big the O-line is, but that D-line is just as big. And I mean, they're wreaking some havoc. 3rd in the country in tackles for loss with 10.5 a game. 9th in the country in sacks for a game. So this unit appears to be the strength of the defense, and they really get pressure with just the 4 down linemen, and they're limiting teams to only 3 yards per rush as well. So talk about that defense, but specifically that line.
Yeah, again, I go back to Coach Kenny's 1 year and Incarnate Word last year, and it was easy to get caught up in the offensive numbers. They were, again, really fun to watch, but defensively, the numbers were just as good. They led the country last year. UIW did in tackles for loss. They were top 5 nationally in sacks. They were top 10 nationally in turnovers forced, and that was with Jonathan Patke as the defensive coordinator. So Coach Patke is now at Texas State with Coach Kenny. They brought with them 3 key players on the defensive side of the ball with them as well. Sam Latham, a defensive end who was really big, 6'7", 250. He's TJ Finley size, but not throwing the ball. Caleb Culp and Sean Holton at safety. Both were playmakers a year ago at UIW. And so, his Jonathan Patke style of defense, they're very aggressive. And while they can get a lot from the guys up front, in terms of pass pressure, they're going to bring pressure from all different angles. You're going to see the linebackers, the safeties creep up, the corners coming in and blitzing. You're going to see defensive tackles drop back in zone coverage, or ends fake the rush and then drop back into, into a passing lane kind of thing. So there's a lot of deception, with that defense. And they've been getting after it too. You referenced the stats. And what's funny is I noticed that Jackson State stats against Southern were very similar. I think Jackson State had 15 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, and 3 turnovers against Southern. Texas State's numbers through 2 games are very similar right now. But the guys up front, that's what you're asking about. There was some retention defensively from what they had a year ago, namely Jordan Revels at defensive end, who's one of the team captains. Ben Bell was listed as a linebacker who usually plays that rush position quite a bit. He does a tremendous job of getting to opposing quarterbacks. They added a lot of size in the interior on the defensive line. A name you're probably going to hear a lot of is Tavion Coleman, number 91. He's a transfer from Utah State. He's been arguably, the best interior D lineman they've had through the first 2 games of the season. And a big player they kind of added very late, in the offseason was Chance Maine. Chance actually was with Coach Prime in Boulder as recently as 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago.
Wow.
And then transfers out, comes to Texas State. I don't think he played at all or a snap. Clint can correct me on that if I'm wrong at Baylor.
No, I don't remember seeing him.
But at UTSA he did, and he was impactful, to the point where he's going to get plenty of reps, from moving forward kind of thing. So, but you're right, Corey. Everything with the defense starts up front, right? I'm a big believer in that. A good secondary complements your guys up front, but a good pass rush complements the secondary as well. The reason, how do you get turnovers? You force the quarterback into mistakes and making throws he doesn't want to make. That all starts up front.
Absolutely. And Clint, I know we talked about a couple of things that you guys will probably focus on cleaning up. Obviously, the third down conversion. We talked about some things in the run game, but if you had to kind of pinpoint something that you believe that coaching staff is focusing on the most in terms of what they need to clean up going into this game, what would you say that would be?
A lot of what we talked about with GJ Kinney on the show Monday nights had to do with execution on the offensive side. I think maybe he was disappointed more just in the way that they handled their business. And it wasn't a letdown necessarily from the Baylor game. It's just he didn't feel like they were able to get comfortable, get into a rhythm, and really kind of get focused as to what they were doing. Another area that I know that they're wanting to make some strides in, flip the third down conversions to the defensive side and getting themselves off the field. And UTSA was able to convert, and I know Baylor was throughout the second half the week before, able to convert some third down and longs. And that's just, it's as a coaching staff, as a fan base, it's one of the more frustrating things is when your defense gets themselves into a 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 situation, allows a third down conversion, and for a drive to continue, more plays they got to be on the field, and gives the team a new set of downs to work with. So I think that right there is one of the big areas that I think I'd like to see, and I'm sure they would too, improvement is getting themselves off the field on third down.
Yeah, absolutely. Despite those struggles on third down offensively, one bright spot for them, especially when you talk about improving the execution, is fourth down conversion. They have a pretty high fourth down conversion rate. I think 30% or so. I'm sorry, 80% or so. So that's always positive. Of course, you never want to put yourself in a fourth down situation, but when they are in that situation, it seems like they're doing a good job of converting. So we're expecting a great game. Obviously, playing you guys for the first time, but from a fan standpoint, because we like to travel, and we've been on the road 3 straight weeks. This will be the 4th week in a row. We started out in Atlanta. Right. Then we're in Miami and then Baton Rouge. So we're kind of tired and ready to stay at the house. But we do expect the crowd to travel. And we have a huge fan base and alumni base throughout the state of Texas. And they don't get a chance to get to a lot of games. So I know they can't wait to visit with you guys. But just talk to our fan base. What can we expect? Talk about the atmospheres, anything that we should know, et cetera.
I'll jump in here first, Clint, and there's a lot of buzz, for this game. Certainly it's the home opener, that's going to draw interest no matter what the circumstances are, but the circumstances matter here now. One of them being that this team beat Baylor a couple of weeks ago, and that got the fan base really excited. Last week, a lot of those fans made the short drive to San Antonio, to watch the game in the Alamo Dome. And, Clint can tell you his firsthand experience being in both of those stadiums is that our fan base turned out in both Waco and San Antonio, and they were loud. So if they're showing up for the road games, imagine what it's going to be like here, in San Marcos. So home opener, exciting brand of football, new head coach, Power 5 win. Though that's all going to create a great game day environment, I would think, from the fan base. And the fact that Jackson State's going to travel as well too, hopefully that place, is filled up pretty nicely, by kickoff, which is later now. It initially was set for 6 p.m. kick, now 7:30, in anticipation of the game, of the temperature being really hot. Although I think what I'm hearing now is that the high is 83, something like that, which
it's changed. Yeah.
It may as well be winter here, 83 degrees, right?
Okay.
So in terms of like in the stadium, they've introduced a number of new concession items, which I, had the chance to actually test out myself last week.
Okay.
So y'all gonna love that. Assuming that you're not showing up just for the game, the tailgate experience to me is one of the best ones in the Sun Belt Conference. In fact, it's been a little bit frustrating in that some of our fans, come out for tailgating but not getting into the stadium. But I don't think that's going to be much of an issue, this Saturday. I think the fans, are ready to get into the stadium and watch this team play. And then if you're making a weekend of it, San Marcos is a tremendous college town. It's right between Austin and San Antonio. So it's very easy to get to, and then when you get into the town itself, they have a great downtown atmosphere, a place called The Square, a number of local restaurants and bars and stuff like that to go check out. We have an outlet mall here if you want to go shopping. Because it's been so hot, people love jumping into the river. We have that, the San Marcos River. The river literally runs through campus. So it's just, it's a student body of close to 40,000. It's a record this year of enrollment. So our student body's never been bigger, kind of deal. So like you come to San Marcos and you're getting a college field. Not that you didn't get that, Corey, in Atlanta or Miami, which are those towns are more SEC towns and pro sports towns. This is a college town, and it's a great one at that.
Wow, I'm definitely excited and looking forward to it. Brant, we may have to hire you as a tour guide after that. Definitely. I don't know if there's anything you can add to that. Anything else we need to look out for or can expect?
No, I mean, Brant hit on it. I think you've got to also acknowledge our athletic director, Don Coryell, and University President Kelly Danfus. They are so active in terms of getting out into the community, into the fan base, into the student body, and encouraging them with, video releases every week to get to the stadium. A South End Zone complex renovation just got started this week. I think I don't know that they've actually put a shovel in the ground yet, but I think some cranes have showed up. It's about to get underway, which will change the way the stadium looks visually. But at the same time, it's one of those things that kind of drives interest in the program because the program is continuing to grow. And, it's my hope that, from a fan base standpoint, there's not too much of here we go again after dropping that one to UTSA, because I do think UTSA picked second in their conference this year with a, seventh-year senior returning at quarterback, a guy named Frank Harris, who's one of those guys who's just kind of got that it factor. He was injured in the game on Saturday, yet continued to play and made plays down the stretch that helped his team win. It's that type of guy that you were trying to beat, and he got you by a touchdown on Saturday. But I think this team is poised to kind of turn the corner towards something special here in San Marcos. And it's my hope that we've got a really good turnout for the home opener coming up on Saturday.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned a 7-year player. We have a 7-year quarterback as well, Mr. Jason Brown. Yeah, he started out on the FCS level at St. Francis, but he actually transferred to South Carolina. He had some big wins against SEC opponents, including a win over the 21st ranked team in the country, and then he went on to Virginia Tech before coming to Jackson State with another year of eligibility. So we're all too familiar with that. So again, looking forward to a great game, great atmosphere. Obviously, with the weather, we love our night games at Jackson State. ESPN plus 7:30 kickoff. We absolutely cannot wait. I do have some disappointing news for you. I don't know if you've heard or if this is breaking news for you. Our world-renowned band, the Sonic Boom of the South, will not make the trip. They will not be traveling. So I'm sorry to break that to you. Yeah, I don't know the situation, but I think they just been on the road for 3 weeks in a row, not to mention obligations throughout the week. So I think they just needed a break. So a little bit of a bummer, but nonetheless, we expect a great atmosphere, a great game day. And a fun fact about these two teams, even though these two programs have never played and are mostly unfamiliar with one another, interestingly enough, there's a little bit of crossover there. Number one, RJ Fleming, who was on your staff last season, I think, as maybe a running backs coach. He had a brief stint at Jackson State as the wide receiver coach after he left. Now, he decided not to stay for whatever reason, so he's going on. I think he's at Toledo now, but he was there and was really great at recruiting during the few months that he was there. He definitely left an impact. And there was a lot of back and forth with that recruiting battle. I think a lot of it had to do with RJ Fleming, but I follow Tiger Talk. We follow recruiting very closely. And there were a number of guys who had offers from both Texas State and Jackson State. And it came down to the wire with a couple of them. You guys won some battles. We won a few battles, but definitely a lot of back and forth there. And one notable name that you ultimately won out on was your freshman quarterback, PJ Hatter. I don't know if you knew this or not, but he was originally verbally committed to Jackson State. And we thought we had him even on up to signing day. For me, it was a shock when he signed with you guys instead of us, because I thought we even had him here on the show, Tiger Talk with 1400 Club. He's been a guest. So you have him. So congratulations on winning that battle. But great job again with you guys with the recruiting, and we're right there with you from a recruiting standpoint. So again, we're looking forward to it. So any final words that you want to say, and if you have any social media for yourself or for Texas State Athletics, be sure to go ahead and promote it.
No, I'll just say that looking forward to a great game. It's Texas State has some history, against the SWAC. Namely, it's been the schools in Texas, Prairie View A&M and Texas Southern. They played Pine Bluff a couple of about 9 years ago, but that's been it. So to have this matchup, take place in St. Marcus for the first time, given where the two programs are right now, I think is phenomenal. So looking forward to that. Clint and I can both be found on social. Mine's at Brant_Freeman. I'll let Clint give his, and highly encouraged by anybody who's watching to turn me off and bring up Clint's radio call instead with syncmygame.com.
Inside joke there with the syncmygame.com reference. You can find me on Twitter at C Shields Radio, no underscores. It's all one word, so to speak. C Shields Radio. So yeah, give us a follow. Looking forward to Saturday night. Nothing wrong with playing Baylor and UTSA. We get Nevada next week, who we saw last year, but you've got something totally fresh in Jackson State coming to town, an opponent you've never seen before, fan base that you're learning about, all the history that goes with that school and that athletic program. And that's fun to me to get to see some new opponents before we, get into the rigors of the Sun Belt of folks that we see each and every year.
Absolutely. Same here. Something new, something different. We don't always get to play an FBS opponent, so it's always great to kind of see where we stack up. Also prepare for conference play, which begins the following week. So we are looking forward to it. So again, thank you guys for joining us. Looking forward to meet you, and just again looking forward to the game and the atmosphere.
Great. Thanks, Corey.
Corey, thank you.
All right, my pleasure. Thank you. Tiger Talk with the 1400 Club is presented by Bet Online.